Hey and welcome, I'm Hammeh, and in my ongoing exploration of everything Overwatch lore related, it's time to take a look at skins once more. This year, Blizzard's first crossover skins will be coming to Overwatch, featuring characters from Blizzard's other universes, StarCraft, Warcraft and Diablo. If you're an Overwatch fan and don't know the lore and stories behind these characters, never fear. In this series, I'll quickly introduce you to the universes, whiz you through the lore and backstories behind the skins and where they come from, and finally, anything about similarities between our Overwatch favourite heroes and the characters their new skins are based on. In this video, I'll be taking a look at the story and history behind Widowmaker's Nova skin coming soon, the StarCraft character Nova Terra, and the similarities between their lore and stories too. So, Widowmaker Amelie LaCroix in Overwatch gets a Nova skin, and this is not the first time the characters have crossed over. In Heroes of the Storm at the moment, Blizzard's hero brawler, Nova has a Widowmaker skin there too. But who is Nova, what's her place in the StarCraft universe and story, and what similarities does she actually share? Well, before we can explain Nova's story and her similarities to Widowmaker, we need to quickly tee up the StarCraft universe. Now, the Terrans, or humans, of the StarCraft universe are in actual fact descendants of basically a scientific experiment from Earth. What would happen if you took 50,000 prisoners, some with genetic modifications and mutations, and forced them to start a new society by flying them off into space in a lot of big ships? In about the year 2259, these prisoners arrived in the Koprulu sector, forming colonies from their ark ships, expanding rapidly for the next 6 generations and forming various factions as they did so. Fast forward another 250 years, and the Terrans are what we see round about the start of the game StarCraft 1, or if you want to play it now, StarCraft Remastered. Now, StarCraft's events deal with the first great war between the Terrans, our humans, and the Zerg and Protoss races. The dominant human faction by this time was the Terran Confederacy. They had been experimenting with discovered xenomorphs, which would in time become known as the Zerg, and they created a device called a psi emitter, which broadcast a signal that would attract Zerg, in theory for the Terrans to use against their enemies internally. However, instead of attracting a few, they attracted a whole race of Zerg, and also the Protoss, who had become aware of the Zerg and their potential threat. They followed the Zerg to monitor and report on them, and then deal with them by cleansing planets they were on. Oops. So in the midst of all this interspecies battling and fighting for survival, where does Nova fit? Well, Nova is known as being a ghost. One of the elite military forces humanity could draw on at this time, ghosts were psychically or psionically, as it's said in the StarCraft world, gifted individuals. They were scouted, then quarantined and trained from a very early age to become elite commandos and assassins. Ghosts were feared combatants known for their assassination and infiltration skills. Potential ghosts were trained in armed and unarmed combat, as well as how to use their psionic powers to augment their fighting abilities. Depending on the strength of the individual's psionic powers, these could range from reading minds to even directly damaging enemies' bodies and even brains without even touching them. Untrained or uncontrolled psionic powers such as these could be dangerous for both the psychic person and those around them. However, ghost training in the StarCraft universe was historically brutal. Children could be conscripted from as young as 8, put into life or death situations at age 12 in Sarah Kerrigan's case, coerced or forced into showing their powers in some circumstances, and being conditioned to be desensitized to combat as well. Such powers were bound to have checks and balances, and in the earlier phases of StarCraft's story, ghosts would be fitted with something called a neural inhibitor. These neural inhibitors would help control the ghost's emotions, but also realistically their behavior. When the Confederacy's most able ghost at the time, one Sarah Kerrigan, defected from the Confederacy to join the rebellious Sons of Korhal groups shortly before the First Great War, or StarCraft 1's events, a more effective control measure was sought, and the memory wipe was devised. Able to be used on a targeted ghost, on a targeted level to remove memories from a specific span of time. This was a way of keeping ghosts under more control. They wouldn't remember their missions or their actions. In later years, under a new Terran Emperor, this mind wipe would be made optional for Ghost operatives, and vast changes were brought to the Ghost program in terms of training. However, that was all a bit late for Nova Terra. Born into one of the Terran Confederacy's richest and most powerful old families, November Annabelle Terra was shielded from her abilities by her parents at a young age, although she led a privileged childhood. When psychic abilities were discovered in children, they'd usually be conscripted straight into the Ghost program by agents known as Wranglers. Nova's telepathic abilities showed themselves as a form of empathy for others, understanding their feelings, with her discovering that she could actually read minds on her 15th birthday, when she read the mind of a suitor. At this time, the Terran Confederacy was in the midst of both fighting the First Great War and from a rebellion from the Sons of Korhal that I've mentioned, led by one Arcturus Mengsk. Although Nova was meant to be evacuated from the capital world and her home Tarsonis, she felt her parents being killed by anti-Confederate rebels. Returning to her home tower, her psychic abilities manifested in spectacular fashion, destroying half a skyscraper, killing her would-be attackers and hundreds of people around. This did not go unnoticed, and the Confederacy immediately began hunting her down with a wrangler to try and recruit her and conscript her into the Ghost program. Trying to live off the grid in the slums of Tarsonis, Nova fell under the sway of an underworld gang. After surrendering to them to prevent further deaths, Nova eventually part escaped, was part rescued by a Confederate wrangler. The Terran Confederacy had become the Terran Dominion after the successful takeover by the Sons of Korhal, and Nova's training began. She was at an initial disadvantage due to her malnourished state from living in the slums, but she showed rapid proficiency in combat, although wasn't so great at teamwork, eventually completing the Ghost training in 2.5 years, a record compared to the usual 4. Making friends and indeed love, such as fellow Ghost Gabriel Tosh, who shows up in StarCraft 2. Nova's story of her training is told in 3 graphic novels and 1 book, StarCraft Ghost Nova. Working in both drills and live exercises, Nova eventually meets Emperor Arcturus Mengsk, who gives her her final graduation mission, which involves killing the commander of the team who was sent to kill her family. Succeeding in the task, Nova embraced the mind wipe that was coming on this occasion, as she really wanted to forget a lot of the trauma she'd suffered over the last few years. And so Nova's service to the Terran Dominion began. In the Second Great War, the events of StarCraft II Wings of Liberty, we saw Nova move against Tosh, her former lover. In one of the missions of that campaign, the player has to choose between siding with Tosh or Nova about Tosh's project to create enhanced ghosts called Spectres, using the chemical compound Terrazine. In the Zerg-focused part of StarCraft II, Heart of the Swarm, Nova leads a raid to try and capture a newly uninfested Kerrigan and Reyna, only catching Reyna in the process. After presumably fighting the Zerg, and after the events of the end of StarCraft II's trilogy, Nova, now working for the new Dominion Emperor Valerian Mengsk, yes, the son of Arcturus, asked her to run a special mission to acquire some discs from another Terran faction, the Emojian Protectorate, that proved his connection to a very controversial research foundation. In an animated comic similar to Overwatch's called The Keep, Nova fights and completes the mission successfully, but is led to reflect on her previous actions by an Emojian Shadow Guard, or Ghost equivalent, who informed her that she'd killed innocent people in a previous mission as collateral damage. Nova also reflects on the fact that she's killed innocents in her latest mission, and telling her Emperor he couldn't bury secrets and memories forever, she prepared for her mind to be wiped. But upon seeing Valerian on the news decide to make the documents and his past connections public, she decided to retain her memories instead, not going through the mind wipe. The latest part of Nova's story continued with her covert operations mission pack. She became involved in the Defenders of Man, which, unbeknownst to her, was a Terran separatist group. Being mind-wiped against her will by the leader of the Defenders of Man, Nova found herself working with an under-fire Emperor Valerian once again to fend off the attempt to undermine his rule. Having ended the threat, Nova found herself abandoning the Dominion and Emperor Valerian entirely, with her special operations ship and loyal crew, to become a vigilante. We'll just have to see where her story heads to next. Now, before we go on to the similarities between Nova and Widowmaker, I hope you've enjoyed that lore summary. I could do a half-hour video on Nova lore alone. If you'd like to see more Nova or StarCraft or other Blizzard or gaming lore, do let me know what you'd like to see in the comments. So, there's the story of Nova. What similarities can we see between her and Widowmaker? Well, Nova and Amelie LaCroix are both from well-off backgrounds. Amelie Guillard, before she married Gerard Lacroix, before she became Widowmaker, does of course have Chateau Guillard, the map that we've seen, her chateau or family chateau in the south of France, so there is some wealth in Widowmaker's background. Nova, well, she lived in Terra Tower. The old families in the StarCraft universe in the Terran Confederacy were very powerful, very rich and well off. They both suffered traumatic incidents, Widowmaker with her kidnapped by Talon of course, before her reconditioning mentally, Nova of course her family's death and her time in the gutter, before of course the missions that she had to do as a ghost. Both have also had mind wipes or mind control elements. Widowmaker had of course Talon's treatment, turning her into this assassin before she went and murdered her husband. Nova, well, she had mandatory mind wipes in ghost training and at the end when she qualified, although at the time she really wanted this, it has to be said. They are of course both lethal combatants and assassins with proficiency in rifles, although of course Widowmaker isn't psychic, and they both are slowly moving away from mind control or wiping, perhaps. Widowmaker might be wearing off or fighting her mind wipe or emotional wipe or mind control if her Gerard Psy voice line and the image in reflections of her visiting Gerard's tomb are anything to go by. Nova in her story used the chemical terrazine to stimulate and regenerate memory and brain cells at various points during her story, and now is choosing the option to reject her mind wipe, seemingly. The two share some interesting crossovers in story, I think they're a great fit, and obviously a cool skin crossover. Thanks very much for tuning in to this skin lore and origins video where we've gone really deep into Widowmaker's Nova skin and her StarCraft background. If you like this vid, do throw a like and share it, and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you thought. For more Overwatch lore, heroes, voice lines, interactions, maps, and more of this skin lore, do check out the playlists on the channel. Until next time, I've been Hammeh, take it easy.